Oficialmente, o Goldman Sachs é um banco de investimentos. Mas que tipo de investimentos? Desde 2008, foram publicados vários artigos que acusavam o banco de enriquecer durante a crise financeira, para além de ter ajudado a criá-la. Foi acusado de trair os clientes e de manipular os preços do comércio mundial. Serão estas acusações verdadeiras? Quem beneficia de tudo isto? Será o banco mais poderoso do que o governo? Há igualmente vários livros publicados que descrevem a forma como o banco conquistou este imenso poder ao longo de 30 anos. Consultei o website Business Insider. Há artigos sobre o Goldman Sachs publicados neste site pelo menos 2 vezes por semana. Um dos jornalistas é a australiana Katia Watchell. Só vi uma pequena fotografia dela, espero que seja suficiente para a reconhecer. Ela não quis ser filmada no escritório, por isso resolvemos gravar a entrevista num restaurante.
How many articles did you write?
50 to 100 articles about Goldman Sachs, and I update them constantly, so it could be more than that, but I think it's about that many. They're the bank that everybody wants to know about. They're the bank that everybody wants to read about. So
how come?
I think it's because they're the best at the moment, although that's also up for debate. But over the past decade, at least, they have been the #1 bank. And I think that when you're #1, people are interested. There's something about the power. It's sexier. So the man on the street can't understand why Goldman would sell a product and then hedge against it. But if you're in the banking world, if you're in finance, it's totally normal. Just because something is, we feel ethically wrong, or we can't understand why anyone could do that, doesn't mean that within that industry, amongst the people who know, it's common, it's what they do. There's always a gap, I think, between moral and legal, and I think that that's something that the government and prosecutors are constantly trying to chase. And they're going to create a new law and they'll create new regulation. The banks are smart. The bankers are incredibly intelligent. They come from the best schools in the country. They know what they're doing. They'll get around.
Investigação com John Cassidy, do jornal New Yorker. Ele cobre Wall Street há 20 anos. John Cassidy compara o setor financeiro com o monstro que Frankenstein criou e que acabou por fugir ao seu controle. Pedi-lhe que me explicasse o que tinha aprendido ao analisar bancos de investimento como o Goldman Sachs.
People are particularly fascinated by Goldman because they're widely seen to be the sort of quintessential Wall Street firm. For 10, 20 years they've been seen as the #1 firm. They hire the smartest people. They make the biggest profits, highest returns on equity, as they say on Wall Street. And they also have this incredible record of producing people who go on to higher office. So they're very close to people in government, not just in the US, but in the UK and other parts of the world. So Goldman Sachs for 10 or 20 years has been a source of envy to other people in the financial industry, and also invariably they get involved in whatever the big story of the day is. Whenever there's a big blow-up, you look around, Goldman, not always, but usually is involved some way or another.
Ao longo de 80 anos, o Goldman Sachs esteve sempre por detrás de todas as crises financeiras significativas. Já em 1929, o Goldman Sachs esteve por detrás da denominada quebra de Wall Street. O próprio Groucho Marx acabou por perder todas as suas economias. Hoje em dia, Goldman Sachs armazena milhões de toneladas de zinco e de alumínio para fazer subir os preços. De acordo com o Wall Street Journal, o Goldman Sachs aconselha os seus clientes a apostarem no colapso financeiro na Europa. O funcionário do Goldman Sachs aceitou dar uma entrevista. É o criador de um website chamado Naked Capitalism, capitalismo a nu. O seu nome é Yves Smith. Fiquei muito admirado, pois quando nos encontramos percebi que Eve Smith é, afinal, uma mulher.
Yes.
Sabendo como o mundo da finança é chauvinista, a Susan achou que teria mais credibilidade se usasse um nome masculino.
Have any influence of the United States government?
I think you'd be crazy to think that they didn't. The question is how much more influence do they have than other players? There's good reason to think they have quite a lot. I mean, you obviously have all these famous names that had very prominent government positions. Of course, you've got, Bob Rubin and Hank Paulson being the most famous.
De facto, Robert Rubin, que era presidente do Goldman Sachs, tornou-se ministro das Finanças de Clinton. Henry Paulson, seu sucessor, seguiu as suas pisadas quando George W. Bush foi eleito. Em 2008, Henry Paulson organizou o maior resgate da história aos bancos e assegurou-se que o Goldman Sachs beneficiava disso o mais que pudesse. Quando Barack Obama chegou ao poder, muitos gestores do Goldman Sachs entraram para a Casa Branca e para o governo. Tratava-se de contratar a raposa para guardar o galinheiro. Por outro lado, alguns ministros e procuradores tornaram-se funcionários do Goldman Sachs. A sua influência espalhou-se pelo mundo inteiro. Centenas deles ocupam posições-chave. Mark Carney, governador do Banco do Canadá. Olusegun Aganga, o ministro do Comércio da Nigéria. E Ben Broadbent, um dos diretores do Banco de Inglaterra. Todos eles são oriundos do Goldman Sachs. Quanto ao novo presidente do Banco Central Europeu, o Mário Draghi, também ele é um ex-vice-presidente do Goldman Sachs. Estávamos de entrevistar os jornalistas do New York Times. Eles foram os primeiros a revelar a fraude do Goldman Sachs. Gretchen Morgenson está a terminar a escrita de um livro. Mas Louis Story aceitou o nosso pedido de entrevista. Foi por causa destas duas jornalistas que o Goldman Sachs foi condenado em 2010 e obrigado a pagar uma multa de 550 milhões de dólares por ter enganado os seus clientes. De imediato, as ações do Goldman Sachs desvalorizaram a 15%.
How do you feel when Goldman Sachs says that their share might go down because of you and other journalists?
Goldman shares do not go down because of journalists or stories or articles. They go down because of things that Goldman does or because of things that the government does. What we do is we tell the stories and we look for the facts. When the financial markets ran into grave trouble, there wasn't enough money for everyone. And what you saw at Goldman, as well as some other banks, is you saw them make some decisions that benefited Goldman but did not benefit their clients. And it occurred in all different sorts of ways. So one way that it occurred was with a hospital in Pittsburgh. And that hospital had bought something called auction rate securities from Goldman. And these are basically short-term investments that are supposed to roll over in auctions all the time. But that market dried up at the beginning of 2008, and Goldman was actually the first bank to pull out, helping it to dry up. But one of its customers was a hospital in Pittsburgh, and that hospital had asked Goldman months before, should we leave this market? And Goldman said to stay. And then when the market dried up, that customer alone was left to bear the loss. At the same time that Goldman was marking down these mortgage bonds, Goldman had its own position, its own negative bet on the mortgage market. Its customers did not know that Goldman was not a neutral broker. The more it marked its customers down, the more that short negative bet benefited Goldman. At the end of 2006, they had a big long position, which means Goldman was betting on the future of the housing market. And in the beginning of 2007, it was very hard to get rid of all of that position. They got rid of a lot, but they could not get rid of all. And so what they did was they built what they called the Big Short, which was a big negative bet that helped offset a lot of that long. And in 2007, it led to a substantial profit for Goldman. Now, Goldman would point to some losses in 2008, but I've been told by a lot of my sources that then they made profits on it in 2009, and they won't release those numbers. But the bottom line is Goldman had a big short. Other banks did not have the big short. Other banks spiraled and suffered and bled, but Goldman survived strong and much better because of this negative bet that they put in place even while their customers suffered.
Também gostava de lhe falar da AIG, a maior companhia de seguros do mundo que foi à falência. Qual foi o papel do Goldman Sachs nesse caso? Que pensa, Luís?
Every story I read, AIG are just a puppet in their hands. How come?
Well, AIG got itself into all these very complex insurance deals with a lot of big banks, including Goldman Sachs. And what AIG gave them was insurance policies, essentially, that said, if those mortgage securities decrease in value, we, AIG, will pay you. Just like, if your house burns down, the insurance company might pay for it. So these were insurance policies on financial instruments. And what happened, of course, is the mortgage securities did collapse. And as they collapsed, Goldman was the first and foremost to demand all this cash from AIG. It was saying, give us more money, give us more money. These are going down in value. Remember, at the same time, Goldman had its big short on. So Goldman profited on its short. It demanded cash from AIG. The market did go down. And all of that cash drained the life out of AIG. And that's why in the fall of 2008, the federal government had to bail out AIG. The only thing is, at the time in 2008, it was kept a secret that all that money went to the banks. It only came out later that this had been sort of a backdoor bailout to the banks through AIG.
Vamos voltar às apostas colocadas no colapso do mercado imobiliário. O escândalo foi tão grande que os representantes do Goldman Sachs foram chamados a depor no Senado. Edward Kaufman fazia parte da comissão que interrogou publicamente os banqueiros. Foi um dos poucos senadores que não aceitou financiamentos do Goldman Sachs durante a sua campanha eleitoral. Hoje está muito admirado por nenhum dos banqueiros ter sido preso.
We had Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, a number of the top people in Goldman Sachs came and testified and told a very hard to believe story. That wasn't an indication you want to get out of that business?
When you tell me get out of the business, Senator, I don't know if I don't know what exactly.
But you see, it's hard for the American people to believe that people this smart really never kind of decided that this thing was going south in a big way.
Senator, I heard your earlier remarks as well. I think we're not that smart.
Never once he said Goldman Sachs decided and announced and put together an investment strategy based on the fact that the housing market was failing. If they can be selling an investment to someone and saying this is a great investment, at the same time selling a derivative that will protect them, it's insurance against it. It's like me selling you a car, saying it was great, and as it goes out the door, I'm buying insurance that the car is going to crash because I know the brakes are no good on the car. They haven't put a case together against Goldman Sachs, any more cases, and the fact that not a single person is going to jail is a total complete, frankly, is very, very, very disheartening and discouraging. And so far, we've seen a trend that the regulators are ruling more and more in favor of the big banks, not ruling in favor of just the common person, the regular person, and the investor. And by the way, some of these investors that are getting hurt by this are very rich people. This is not just rich versus poor. Many of the people that are suffering from the high-frequency trading are suffering from the naked short selling, they cover the whole gamut of investors in the United States. So it isn't just the rich versus the poor. It basically is the big banks versus everybody else. And one of the things that happened in the United States was after September 11th, we moved a whole lot of our FBI agents off of financial fraud into terrorism, which we should have done. It was the right thing to do. But we should have filled in those FBI spots, and we didn't. But self-regulation doesn't work. It doesn't work in the financial industry. It doesn't work on the streets. You can't. It doesn't work in sports. Can you imagine in a sporting event if you said, look, you know, the referees are getting in the way. They keep slowing down the game, they're blowing their whistles. What we need to do is we need to get rid of all the referees. Can you imagine what would happen in a football game if, in fact, you put all the referees off the field? I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the middle of that field about 5 minutes into that game. And essentially, that's their argument. The same way the police in the streets.
Apenas 20% dos negócios são tratados através da Bolsa de Nova Iorque. A maior parte das transações atuais são efetuadas fora do sistema de controlo da Bolsa, do computador de um banco para o computador de outro, discretamente e à velocidade da luz. E quando os preços do trigo, do café, da soja ou do petróleo duplicam ou triplicam, não é por causa das flutuações da oferta e da procura, mas sim porque o Goldman Sachs e os seus competidores servem-se de boatos que eles próprios fabricam para ganharem as apostas sobre a subida ou a baixa dos preços. Dia de Assembleia Geral de Acionistas do Goldman Sachs. Realiza-se na outra torre, a Torre de Nova Jersey, do outro lado do rio Hudson. Muitos acionistas afirmam que isto só é uma tentativa de os dissuadir de participarem na reunião. Um guarda ameaçou prender-me se me aproximasse mais e alguns acionistas nem sequer são bem-vindos.
The Jersey City Police, where this meeting is taking place, called our organization and said that our names were on a list that had been given to them by Goldman Sachs as potential troublemakers at their annual meeting.
Goldman Sachs, pay your tax. Don't bounce the budget on the people's backs. Goldman Sachs, pay your tax. Don't bounce the budget on the people's backs. Goldman Sachs, pay your tax. Don't bounce the budget on the people's backs.
À saída, encontramos um dos acionistas que gerem o dinheiro de várias comunidades religiosas.
Goldman Sachs executives are among the richest people in the world, and there are 1 billion plus people in the world at the bottom of the pyramid, which means they are suffering from poverty and mainly food insecurity. And because Goldman Sachs is at the heart of the financial, economic, and speculative communities, we believe that that is truly affecting our global community in a way that is not sustainable. So we are looking that executive compensation can be seriously addressed and our global community can become more sustainable.
Entendo a sua desilusão. Em 2010, os lucros da Goldman Sachs diminuíram 37%, mas os salários dos 5 administradores principais triplicaram. Há um website que mostra os artigos e os programas de televisão mais importantes contra o Goldman Sachs. Queria saber quem estava à frente disto e resolvi deslocar-me à Flórida para me encontrar com Larry Rubinoff. Larry esteve à frente de uma imobiliária durante 20 anos, até ao colapso do mercado. Hoje, a sua ocupação consiste em manter o website atualizado. O Goldman Sachs tentou a sua supressão, mas o tribunal decidiu que Larry podia mantê-lo em funcionamento, uma vez que não tirava qualquer lucro financeiro disso.
My involvement stems from my anger of what the banking system did to create the economic crisis, the global economic crisis, hurting literally millions and millions of people, primarily middle-class people. Purely out of greed, they motivated themselves to take advantage of little people.
Goldman Sachs, did they suffer from this subprime problem?
Goldman Sachs didn't suffer at all. Goldman Sachs has had its best years since the mortgage meltdown and since the worldwide economic crisis. Goldman Sachs has come out on top. They knew the mortgages would fail. They never told anyone. They were very instrumental in this crisis that the entire world has gone through. They paid rating agencies to give false ratings on these issues that led investors to believe they were safe. Countries and entire nations, municipalities, unions, they duped everyone.
After the very last Wall Street reform, do you expect some benefit?
Absolutely none. Business is going on in Wall Street and with the banks as usual. Derivatives are still being sold and traded. Mortgage-backed securities are still being created and sold and traded. We just don't know what ratings are put on them. But they're doing as much now, if not more, than they were before. So I see absolutely no change.
How come our Western government are so weak?
It's perhaps that Goldman Sachs and other banks and financial institutions have a great deal of power over the government. It's not that the government is so weak. It's possibly that those that control our finances and our money are a little bit stronger. There was a quote by a gentleman that created the concept of the central banking system, what we know here in this country is the Federal Reserve System. His name was Mayor Rothschild. He said, "Let me control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws." If you think about that, it's a very profound statement. If the banks and Goldman Sachs can control all the money, they can pretty much control the governments and the laws within those governments.
How come there are not more people revolting?
I think people, especially in this country, have a fear. They have a fear of retribution. They become sheep. They're being led to the slaughter, and they don't believe, they truly don't believe in their hearts that they can fight against these institutions.
Contaram que eurodeputado ficou absolutamente furioso quando descobriu que os peritos financeiros que aconselham a Comissão Europeia são, afinal, grupos de pressão pagos pelos grandes bancos.
Goldman Sachs ne contribue en rien à faire en sorte que l'économie fonctionne mieux et au développement des entreprises. Au contraire, ils peuvent gagner énormément d'argent quand les choses vont mal. Bon. Donc tout leur savoir-faire, c'est de bien se positionner. Mais c'est aussi d'influencer les marchés, d'influencer les décideurs, d'influencer les lois pour que les paris qu'ils ont pris se réalisent. Et donc, quand vous avez, par exemple, la possibilité de parier à la baisse de la valeur d'une obligation grecque, si l'obligation grecque baisse, vous gagnez de l'argent. À ce moment-là, vous avez tout intérêt à avoir une sorte de campagne de presse qui dit « Ouh là là, la situation est catastrophique en Grèce, ça empire de jour en jour ». Et vous avez donc d'autres acteurs des marchés qui vont vendre. Et si les gens vendent, le prix baisse, et c'est à ce moment-là que Goldman Sachs gagne, puisque Goldman Sachs a juste parié sur l'évolution du prix. Ils ont besoin d'opacité, ils ont besoin des paradis fiscaux, ils ont besoin du secret bancaire, ils ont besoin que les règles qui encadrent les transactions financières ne soient pas transparentes. Donc tous ces produits qui se créent depuis 20 ans, ce qu'on appelle pudiquement l'innovation financière, c'est ça qui est le ressort de l'augmentation du risque.
Et alors impudiquement, on devrait les appeler comment?
Impudiquement, on devrait les appeler des bombes à retardement. Parce qu'on est en train de créer plus de risques que d'en supprimer. La finance, le lobbying des financiers, c'est de dire on prend en charge le risque, on couvre le risque, on hedge le risque, on arbitre le risque. La réalité, c'est le contraire. La réalité, c'est qu'ils créent plus de risques qu'ils n'en suppriment.
À saída, soube que o Goldman Sachs também está na mira da Reserva Federal Americana. Em 2009, uma das suas subsidiárias, a Lytton Loan, despejou ilegalmente milhões de famílias. A Reserva Federal Americana considerou o Lytton Loan culpado de negligência e de práticas irregulares, bem como de comportamento inapropriado. Durante alguns anos, François Guéraud levou a cabo investigações contra crimes económicos e acaba de escrever um livro acerca de crimes financeiros. Pedi-lhe que nos explicasse esses mecanismos criminosos.
Les banquiers qui distribuaient ces prêts subprime, donc dits prédateurs ou menteurs, savaient très bien que ces prêts, un jour ou l'autre, allaient étrangler littéralement les plus vulnérables de la société américaine. Il y a même une expression encore plus révélatrice et plus ignoble de la toxicité de ces prêts. Les financiers parlaient de prêts à neutrons, par référence à l'arme à neutrons. L'arme à neutrons, c'est une arme qui détruit les personnes, mais qui laisse en place les bâtiments. Donc ces prêts subprime allaient un jour ou l'autre, de manière très consciente et très volontaire, en quelque sorte détruire les ménages américains qui allaient être étranglés, mais laisser intactes des maisons qui pourraient être ensuite rachetées par les banques elles-mêmes. À partir des années 70 aux États-Unis, il y a eu un rééquilibrage ou un renversement de pouvoir entre le monde financier, qui est à New York, à Wall Street, et à Washington, là où il y a les institutions politiques. Petit à petit, la finance américaine a pris de plus en plus de poids dans le système américain et a commencé petit à petit à tenir en laisse le pouvoir politique.
Est-ce qu'il y a des gens au-dessus de Goldman Sachs? Est-ce qu'ils ont des comptes à rendre à quelqu'un?
On peut penser que l'impunité est criminogène, c'est-à-dire que l'impunité est une incitation permanente à commettre de nouveaux crimes. C'est vrai pour un voleur de banque et c'est vrai aussi pour un banquier voleur. Voilà. Et c'est tout le problème du système américain. Comme il ne sanctionne pas réellement, il incite en permanence à des comportements au minimum douteux. Or, la dérégulation, au moins quand elle est pratiquée de manière très dogmatique, très fondamentaliste, elle est criminogène, c'est-à-dire qu'elle constitue une incitation permanente à des fraudes et elle crée de manière systématique des opportunités de fraude.
A falta de regulação é convite permanente à fraude. O que pensa uma celebridade do mundo do jornalismo como Dan Rather acerca de tudo isto? Trabalhou na CBS News durante 24 anos e continua a apresentar programas noticiosos independentes. Aos 80 anos de idade, ainda desfruta de sucesso notável.
Go greener. This is the tale of Olga Ooze. Denture paste gave her the blues. Yuck! Until at last she found...
This we have to understand about a company like Goldman Sachs and about Wall Street in general. It is gambling. It is a big casino. But, and this is very important, at the best casinos, you walk in the door, you know you're gambling. However, you have confidence that the casino will abide by the casino rules. No dealing from the bottom of the deck. No having cards up the sleeve. The roulette wheel is an honest roulette wheel. It's gambling, but it's, if there's such a phrase as honest gambling, you know the rules, you know the risks, we know the dice were loaded, we know the roulette wheel was fixed. However, up to and including the time you and I are talking here, I think there's been only one really big Wall Street operator who's been brought to justice on criminal charges. Under our law and our regulations, they've been brought up under civil charges, so they pay a fine. The fine looks big in the paper. X firm pays $100 million. Chump change to these guys. As long as they can only suffer monetary losses, I fear they'll continue to do it. But if you start sending some to prison, and legitimately so, and our government, both Republican and Democratic now, our governments have a lot to answer for. It's inelegant to say so, but what's developed in the United States of America, not this country alone, but it has developed here, is that big government is in bed with very big business, very big corporations, huge international conglomerate corporations, including but not limited to banks. So they're in bed with one another. The big corporations make huge campaign contributions. Footnote, our last presidential campaign, when all is said and done, cost about $2 billion. That's with a B, $2 billion. So while some people give to political campaigns altruistically for the right reasons, by and large, the people who give the money to the politicians to run their election campaigns expect to get something.
Serão os donos do mundo? Não, são apenas os melhores. São os melhores a criar explosivos suficientemente poderosos para causarem a implosão do sistema. Para analisar este perigo à escala mundial, precisava de encontrar alguém com o distanciamento suficiente, um ex-correspondente de guerra, galardoado com o prémio Pulitzer. Chris Hedges é um dos raros intelectuais americanos que se manifestou contra os desvios dos grandes bancos. Há poucos anos demitiu-se do New York Times para prosseguir as suas investigações com maior liberdade. A sua visão do mundo vai muito para além da perspectiva meramente financeira.
What is specific about Goldman Sachs?
Because partners at Goldman Sachs are pushed out of the institution at a fairly young age. They gravitate into the political system. So there are a huge number of former partners and even heads of Goldman Sachs who have achieved direct political power. And really, it is fair to say that it is impossible in this country to vote against the interests of Goldman Sachs.
How big is the power of Goldman Sachs?
Well, Goldman Sachs has the power to bring down economies, as they have in Greece. It's all about bond ratings. And when they declare a particular government insolvent, the consequences are drastic because they force the government, in order to continue to be able to borrow money, to impose the kind of austerity measures that have crippled Greek society and which are crippling the United States. We're all hostage to this game of speculation.
You have seen the Senate hearing. What do you think?
Political theater. As soon as the lights go out and the cameras leave, these people all go to lunch. Nobody achieves political power in this country without the backing of the financial sector. Since the collapse of 2008, it is that these institutions are untouchable. We can't do anything to stop them. They have looted the U.S. Treasury and are engaging in the same kind of speculation, casino capitalism that they engaged in before the bubble deflated, wiping out $17 trillion in wages and savings of small shareholders and ordinary Americans. These people are criminals. In the 17th century, speculators were hung. And here, every single institution, from the press to universities to the courts to the legislative bodies to the executive branch of government, dance to the tune that they play. And there's absolutely no way that ordinary citizens can fight back. There is no mechanism within the formal structures of power by which we can fight back. We live not in a democracy, but what the political philosopher Sheldon Woolen calls a system of inverted totalitarianism. And by that, he means it's not classical totalitarianism. It doesn't revolve around a demagogue or a charismatic leader, but finds its expression in the anonymity of the corporate state. We're being destroyed financially, morally, politically, and economically. And the institutions that do it, and maybe the crown institution that is doing it, is Goldman Sachs. They know no limits. They turn everything into a commodity that they exploit until exhaustion or collapse, which is why the environmental crisis is intimately twinned with the economic crisis. The death of the American empire is not a tragedy. It's probably a good thing. It's just how we're dying that is so frightening, because we're lashing out like a wounded animal. And, empires, the tyranny empires impose abroad, they always bring home. They always impose at home. Thucydides and Plutarch wrote about that in ancient Athens. Athenian democracy was slaughtered by the Athenians. And we're doing exactly the same thing. Civilizations from Easter Island to the Ottoman Empire to the collapse of Imperial Russia, they always exhaust their own potential and their own resources. The danger is that this time it's global. We bring the whole planet down with us. There is nowhere left to migrate to.
It's going to crash, and it's going to fall pretty hard, because markets are ruled right now by fear. Investors and the big money, the smart money, I'm talking about the big funds, the hedge funds, the institutions, they don't buy this rescue plan. They basically, they know the market is toast. They know the stock market is finished. The euro, as far as they're concerned, they don't really care. They're moving their money away to safer assets, like treasury bonds, 30-year bonds, and the US dollar. So it's not going to work.
We keep hearing that whatever the politicians are suggesting, and admittedly it's all been rather woolly so far, isn't right. Can you pin down exactly what would keep investors happy, make them feel more confident?
That's a tough one. Personally, it doesn't matter. See, I'm a trader. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I go with what if I see an opportunity to make money, I go with that. So for most traders, it's not about we don't really care that much how they're going to fix the economy, how they're going to fix the whole situation. Our job is to make money from it. And personally, I've been dreaming of this moment for 3 years. I have a confession, which is I go to bed every night, I dream of another recession. I dream of another moment like this. Why? Because people don't seem to maybe remember, but the 30s depression, the depression in the 30s, wasn't just about a market crash. There were some people who were prepared to make money from that crash. And I think anybody can do that. It isn't just for some people in the elite. Anybody can actually make money. It's an opportunity. When the market crashes, when the euro and the big stock markets crash, if you know what to do, if you have the right plan to set up, you can make a lot of money from this. For example, hedging strategies is one. Then investing in bonds, treasury bonds, that sort of stuff.
If you could see the people around me, jaws have collectively dropped at what you've just said. I mean, we appreciate your candour, however, it doesn't help the rest of us, does it, or the rest of the Eurozone?
I would say this, listen, I would say this to everybody who's watching this. This economic crisis is like a cancer. If you just wait and wait thinking this is going to go away, just like a cancer, it's going to grow and it's going to be too late. What I would say to everybody is get prepared. This is not a time right now to wishful thinking the government is going to sort things out. The governments don't rule the world. Goldman Sachs rules the world. Goldman Sachs does not care about this rescue package, neither does the big funds. So actually, what I would actually tell people, I want to help people. People can make money from this. It isn't just traders. What they need to do is learn about how to make money from a downward market. The first thing people should do is protect their assets, protect what they have. Because in less than 12 months, my prediction is the savings of millions of people is going to vanish. And this is just the beginning. So I would say be prepared and act now. The biggest risk people can take right now is not acting.
Alessia Rastani, thank you very much for talking to us.
Do you dream about the economy at night?
I try not to.
Yeah.
Nightmares.
18 minutes past 11.